guys, and welcome to Indie April. If you're not too sure what Indie April is, it's basically every year in the month of April, shock, we have Indie April, which is when independent artists, mostly musicians and authors, shout about their work, try to promote what they've done, try to introduce you to new works so that maybe you'll buy something and they can continue to eat and pay their rent. So that's what we're doing today. Last year for Indie April, I did a series where I went through my novels and I talked a bit about the inspiration behind them, the research that went into them, because a lot of them are historically based, so there's quite a bit of background goes on there. And just, talked a bit about how those books came into being. So if you're interested in that, I will leave the playlist below. You can go have a little look through my backlist. This year for Indie April, I am going to try and kick myself up the arse because I have not been writing for quite a long time now. Although this channel is called Writer in Rwanda, it's mostly focused on life in Rwanda and very much avoiding any form of writing in the recent past. So I'm going to explain the reason for that. I'm going to explain my dilemma, and I'm going to explain the dilemma that many authors, especially independent authors like myself, kind of face, is the sort of the difficulty of deciding whether or not to aim for an agent, aim for a publisher, or self-publish. And there are various pros and cons to each of these. So I'm going to go into that a little bit, and I'm going to try to make a decision about my current WIP, my current work in progress. So 2 years ago, back in January 2022, in fact more than 2 years ago, I finished writing my last novel. Done! It was called Sargon. It was called Sargon, still is called Sargon, and it's about the man who founded the first ever empire in history, the Akkadian Empire, so Sargon of Akkad. And I never meant to write that book. It was actually supposed to be about his daughter, Enheduanna, who was the first named author in history. So I was really interested in Enheduanna, and I started the research for Enheduanna, and I began writing Enheduanna. But when I sat down to write about Enheduanna, I realised quite quickly that I sort of needed to explain a bit about how she rose to such a position of prominence, because her name actually means priestess of Nana, Enheduanna, and she was the priestess of the moon in what was then unified Sumer under the Akkadian Empire. So she was really high up in authority. But the reason that she got to that position of power is due to her father, who was Sargon of Akkad and had founded this empire of which she was now sort of top priestess. And so I realised I kind of needed to explain a little bit about Sargon and the rise of the Akkadian Empire and how it got to Enheduanna. So I thought I thought I could write that as maybe just a sort of a background chapter at the beginning of Enheduanna, and that's what I set out to do. And I started writing, and I kept writing, and I kept writing, and I didn't know when to quit. And it got kind of difficult because we're covering like 35 years of the building of an empire, the foundation of the first empire in history, and I suddenly realised I couldn't really just squeeze that into a little footnote at the beginning of this novel. So generally, if you're not familiar with novels, sort of around the 50,000 mark, anything below that kind of is a novella. Sort of a standard novel is usually somewhere around 70 to 90,000 words. When you get into 100,000 words, that becomes a bit of a saga. So for example, The Children of Lear, that came in at around 120,000 words. So yeah, that's a historical sort of saga. That's a solid long novel. And then when you get to 160,000 words, which is what this ended up being, you're talking in the realms of pretty much unpublishable. If you write something that is too short, like I did write a novella once, which was around 50, 60,000, and I had great feedback from publishers who just said, yeah, I really liked it, but we don't publish novellas. And now I've got the other end of the spectrum, is I've written something so long that publishers look at it and they go, no. Because there is definitely a belief that people don't read long novels. And I think it's a two-way thing here. I think there's a few things going on. Firstly, it's believed that people don't read long books anymore. But secondly, we've got an industry that pushes people not to read long books anymore, because a publishing industry is built on people buying books. And if you're going to spend a couple of months reading a long book, you're not buying shorter books. So if you're writing books that are too long, you're kind of considered to be not commercially viable. So that's a nice label. I am not commercially viable. I kind of cringe at this term, not commercially viable, because I'm not enjoying the commercial landscape at present in a lot of different industries. So I watch Penguin Zero, Moist Critical, quite a bit, and he was saying the other day about something similar going on in gaming and gameplay, is that they're now selling games where you can pay to buy packages to finish the game quicker. And like he was saying, it's like, well, who the fuck buys a game hoping to finish it in an hour? You know what I mean? It's like, oh geez, you know, I've paid like $70 for this, I really hope it's over soon. And I kind of feel like it's the same push in books at the moment. Is there's definitely been a bit of mainstream fiction that I've read recently, and I've kind of read it and got to the end, and it felt like you could almost see the publisher looking over the manuscript, looking over the author's shoulder and going, wrap it up, come on, speed it up, wrap it up. You definitely got a sense that if the author had been left alone, they probably would have come to a slightly longer, more satisfactory conclusion. And also, just from my own experience, I mean, I like short books and I like long books. I do not pick up a book looking at the size of it and think, oh, that's a short book, I'm going to read that, that's a long book, I'm not going to read that, because it's about the story. And if the story's a good story, I want more of it. I want it to carry on, you know. At the moment, I'm reading a book called 4321, and I've forgotten the author and I'm really sorry. I will pop it somewhere around here. But 4321, it wasn't written that long ago, but it is a modern masterpiece. I mean, this guy's just incredible, and he's always going off on these tangents that are sort of not directly related to the story. Like there's an entire tangent he goes off on about the life of these shoes living in a cupboard, and it's really hard to explain, but I really enjoyed it. It had nothing really to do with the main story, but I really enjoyed it. And this book is big. I saw a copy, we have a secondhand bookshop here in Kigali, and I saw a copy of it on the shelf the other week, and it is a big fat tome. And I have not sat down and read the whole thing in one sitting. Is what I've done is I read a bit, then I go away and I read something else, and then I come back and I read some more. And you know, I'm going away and coming back, but I always come back because I want to know what the ending is. And the fact that I'm taking my time over it doesn't mean that it's not good. And I've noticed this as well with Netflix, is I think that there's an algorithm or something that is watching how quickly people binge a series. There was a company called Inkit or something where you could upload an unpublished manuscript and it would track how quickly the public readers were turning pages. And I think as well maybe Kindle does that, where it monitors how much of a book somebody reads and, you know, how quickly they get through it. And I think that that metric is wrong. It works for a lot of people, possibly the vast majority of people, but it doesn't work for everybody. Because myself and a lot of my friends, if we find something on Netflix, like the one at the moment has been The Gentleman, which is a Guy Ritchie production, it's absolutely delightful, and we've just been loving it. And the thing is, we don't sit down and binge it because we enjoy it so much that we ration it. So it's like, oh, you know, you watch one a day or you'll slow yourself down to sort of prolong the pleasure, to enjoy it more. So yeah, there are loads of people who go straight in there to binge everything about something that they like. And then there's sort of the delayed gratification kind of approach, where you're really enjoying something, so you want it to go on for a bit longer, even if that means sort of waiting a little bit. So anyway, I've just gone off on a massive tangent there. Dragging myself back to the topic, I finished writing Sargon in January 2022. And then, as is my way, I forgot about it for a while, and I forgot about it for a really long while because I was, I guess, a bit disappointed in myself, because it's not the book I wanted to write. It was supposed to be a side story that ran away with me. It turned into this giant big book, and I didn't know how to feel about it because, in my mind at that point in my life, I was supposed to have written a completely different book, and I was supposed to be happily editing that, and I hadn't. And what I realised is, because I'd started writing Sargon as though it was a side story, I'd written it in a different style to how I would have written it if I had specifically sat down to write the life story of Sargon. And I call this the Stevens dilemma. So around about the time that I had finished writing this book, I was reading two separate novels. I'd watched an author conversation by historical novelists Stephen Saylor and Stephen Pressfield. And I'd enjoyed watching the talk so much that I went and bought their books. Stephen Saylor is very famous for writing about ancient Rome, and he wrote this book called Empire. And it's very, very engaging on a very sort of easy to get into level. It's very much a narrative story about these lives that intertwine over generations during the founding of Rome, and it's just written in a very accessible way. Whereas Stephen Pressfield wrote an incredible book called The Virtues of War, where he wrote, I think it was first person as Alexander the Great, and it was short, and it was highly literary, and it was poetic, and it was just brilliantly done. And if I look at those two books and I think about the life of Sargon, I want to write it as Stephen Pressfield wrote Virtues of War. I like literary, a bit like Rosie Hours when I wrote that. There's something quite literary, a bit poetic about it. I'm a sucker for poetic authors. And it's not that I didn't enjoy Empire, I did enjoy Empire, but it's written in a very, very different style that is not my natural style. So if I was going to set out today to write Sargon of Akkad, I probably in my head would have gone for more of a Stephen Pressfield approach, which is definitely where I've gone with Enheduanna and what I meant to do with Enheduanna. But because I was writing this as a background story, I went for past tense, I went for third person, I went for the Stephen Saylor approach. And it's not that it's in any way bad, but it's not what I'm naturally comfortable writing. By the time you get to 160,000 words, it's too late to change it. It really is. And I just got so sort of wrapped up in writing this book that I don't know, I lost track of everything that I wanted to do originally, which was Enheduanna. So anyway, I'm really babbling on here. So from October to December, basically, I went through the entire manuscript. I was editing it. I like to have a printed copy because I feel that you catch differences or typos, or you find things that you want to change each time that you change the type font of your story.
Then let me do some editing. Yeah, no, you're not gonna let me do some editing. You just want love. Nobody wants me to do any editing today. No editing is going to be happening.
So I like to have a printed copy. When that's sort of edited and the changes are made, I then like to go through it on a Kindle, so reading it on different devices helps. I also go through it using text to speech, so you can make Word read out loud to you. And sometimes you catch little things, small typos that your eyes skip over, because it has been proven it's pretty damn near impossible to proofread your own work. You can't, because once you know what's coming next in a sentence, your eyes just skip straight over, because you're not reading every single letter, every single word in a sentence. Your mind skips ahead to make the best guess, and it totally overlooks a lot of mistakes. So I like to have it read out as well, so that I can hear, things that I don't see with my eyes. And I also like to read out my words, because I often find that if words can be read out loud, they usually flow quite well on a page. And it's, for me, kind of an important thing, because I am a bit literary sometimes. If you read something like Children of Lear, Rosie Hours, I like the higher language forms occasionally. I like to play with wording, I like to play with alliteration, and sometimes that works really, really well, and it creates a wonderful sort of poetic flow. And sometimes it's an absolute clanger, and if it's a complete tongue twister to say, then the brain also tends to trip over it a bit whilst it's reading. So I find that helpful.
She led him to a tiled room with soap and water. There was a sunken hollow in the floor, lined with tiles and fed by a wooden chute, which brought water directly from a nearby stream. Heavy Heavy copper cylinders sat close by for heating the water with charcoal.
And so yeah, I did that for a couple of months, and I put the book down and I went away. And then I went back to it in March. I went down to Kigali Heights and I spent a few days just like editing and going through it again. And then I just kind of put the book down again for a really, really long time, about a year, because I felt so stuck. I felt that I couldn't finish it because I'd lost all objectivity. I didn't know how to feel about it. Sometimes I finish a book and it's like, yes, this is brilliant, this is excellent, I can't wait to edit this, and oh, this is just an excellent book, and you can tell it's gonna fly. But sometimes you get to the end of a book like this one and you're right on the fence. So there's 2 novels that I've written in my life that went into a bottom drawer and they will never see the light of day. They're never coming out of there. And that's a lot of words and a long time to spend on something that is just done. There's going to be no life in it. And with this, I couldn't tell. I was feeling very, very on the fence, because people were beta reading and they were going, no, this is good. But I couldn't see it because it wasn't the book I wanted it to be. And I just couldn't get over that kind of annoyance at myself for having not written what I wanted to write. I was in a bit of an artistic existential crisis there. And so what I tend to do once I've finally finished a novel to a point where I'm happy with it, is I try to get it out the door. And in years gone by, I've always started off by submitting to publishers. You try the big ones and then you try small press. And I've usually struck it lucky with small press. I've had a few books that have been published. But now the order that I'm getting, I've kind of realised it's agent or self-publishing. Like, those are the 2 routes that I would recommend if anybody's writing at the moment and thinking, oh, where do I start applying? Because yeah, small press are actually not bad. Although I feel like there are many less. Oh my God, I'm a writer and I've come out with that. There are many less publishers now. Many fewer. There are fewer. Fuck's sake, I just edit that. There are fewer small press around, as there are fewer big press around. There used to be the big 6 publishers, and I think now we're down to 4 because they keep buying each other out, and it's a really difficult marketplace because there have never been more writers in history than there are now. And now we seem to be getting fewer and fewer publishers, and the market is becoming so single-minded about what it accepts. So the reason I say an agent or self-publishing is because I've had a bit of success with small publishers in the past, early on, and what I realised is that getting the book published is not the hurdle. Marketing the book is the sodding hurdle, and small press just don't have a marketing budget. Although having said that, there was one small press, Ghostwoods, which was absolutely brilliant. They were absolutely fantastic, cannot criticise there. They put everything into what they were doing. They were brilliant at getting the marketing out there, getting the blog tours out there. They even managed to turn the book into an audiobook with famous author Emma Newman, who provided the voiceover. I'll leave a link to her channel below. Her books are fantastic. So it was just a brilliant collaborative process, and I really enjoyed that. There was a lot of collaboration going on there, very supportive. But even they have struggled over the years, just because it is such a difficult thing to do, to be a publisher when there is so little entry to the market and to marketing, and you know, it's really hard to get your book seen now in this sort of tsunami of books. So really what you're aiming for is the really big publishers, and the only way that you can get to the really big publishers is through an agent. So people go, oh yeah, but then you've got to pay the agent. Well, that's fine. You know, if the agent's making you money, then sharing that money is fine. Because the other option is you go straight to a publisher, and you know, Ghostwoods was an exception. They gave me a 50-50 split of profit, which is pretty much unheard of. Usually you're looking at about 12%, sometimes less. You know, you know, 12% of nothing is, well, nothing, you know. So if the choice is between having an agent who will get you access to a big publisher who has a marketing budget, who can sell copies and therefore make money, then that's great and you're all doing well. But if the other option then is, you know, small press and nobody's got any money and nobody can market this and you're not selling books, then it's kind of a no-brainer. At that point, self-publishing is a very, very viable option, because yeah, you're not earning much, but at least you get to keep all of the not very much that you're earning. And I do really love self-publishing. When I was young and I was starting out with these books, and I was thinking, oh well, you know, to be an author I really have to get a proper publisher, you know, that's the way forward. And now I'm in my 40s and I'm looking at the publishing industry thinking, I don't think I'm that happy with the direction a lot of it's going in. I don't feel comfortable with this whole concept that you have to be commercially viable. I fully understand it for the publishing industry, because it is an industry, it has to sell books, it needs to make money in order to exist. No criticism there at all. But just for me as an individual, as a human being, my goal has never really been that money oriented. I didn't start writing in order to become a commercial viability. I mean, who does? You know, it's like, oh, nice to meet you. Hello. What's your name? Oh, hi, I'm Marion. Hello, Marion. Lovely to meet you. What do you do? Oh, I'm a commercial viability. It's like, who does that, you know? Yeah, so it makes me deeply uncomfortable, and I don't think I want to play that game. So I like self-publishing, not only because, you know, it allows me to work at my own pace, but it also gives me complete creative control over everything. How long the book is, how edited it is, the cover. I mean, I've spoken before about cover disappointments, where covers have not quite been what I would have hoped for, you know, so to have the full control of that is also very nice. What I miss with self-publishing is the collaboration. I love to collaborate. I mean, that's a really nice thing. Even with small press, that's worth doing, not for the money, but for the experience, if you get a good one. Because I've had small press who have been absolutely flipping useless, you know, who didn't want to edit anything, who just really didn't collaborate. They just wanted the work and they wanted to publish it and they wanted to try and sell it, which was fine. But you know, it's really, really nice to have a full collaborative experience where you've got really artistic people who are all on the same page and you're just working to make this copy of something the best it can possibly be and the most interesting it can be. I really like that collaborative side of it, and that you do miss with self-publishing. But given the options, so if you can get an agent, if you can't self-publish, and the bit in the middle there is just, it's worth just skipping over it at the moment. I hate to say that because I love small press, but the number of them who go out of business very soon after publishing your work, the number who stop paying royalties, the number that just fold, and you know, don't get you to a place where you would like to be, it's a lot. And if you're taking less money for it at the same time, then that's doubly problematic. So the dilemma that I hit with Sargon is, as I've mentioned, it's a book that I don't feel entirely confident about. I am completely unable to objectively decide what I feel about it anymore, but I know that I need to get it out of the door if I'm ever going to write anything else, because I spent the past 2 years either editing it, ignoring it, or worrying about the fact that I've been ignoring it. So I need to do something with it one way or the other. So I kind of a bit half-heartedly sent it out on spec, which is just where you send a ping around, sort of, does anybody want this? And I did get back a positive response from a very prominent agency, a very well-known literary agent in the UK. And I will just read you what it says. I'm going to have to avert my gaze for a moment here. We all agreed that you can write, love the world you created and its characters, and found the premise of the series intriguing. We particularly enjoyed the first chapter, but thought that the amount of exposition, in particular all the character backstories in the subsequent chapters, slowed the narrative down. We wondered whether paring it right back, allowing the story to sing through brevity, might serve it well. I have to say that doing so would likely make it a more commercial proposition. Ultimately then, we are keen to see both a considerably slimmed down book 1 and or book 2 focusing on Enheduanna as soon as it's ready. Ooh, that's a difficult dilemma. It's a very, very difficult dilemma to be put in, because it's extremely flattering. I mean, that first part, we all agreed you can write. It's kind of sweet, but you know, that means something coming from a large literary organisation, large literary agency. It's sort of like, well done, you're not shit. It's like, thank you. But it's difficult because it's very, very tantalising. But really, I think what they'd be looking at there is to lose about 60,000 words from the manuscript, because when they say a highly pared down, cut back version, anything over 100,000 words is, I mean, some agents won't even accept to look at that, you know. So I think they mean to cut out a vast quantity of the book. And the problem that I have is that I see where they're coming from, and I'm totally not averse to chopping out, you know, paragraphs, sometimes entire chapters. I've done it before, but I mean, I just doesn't quite, I don't know with Sargon. It's that horrible thing. If I did that, there's no guarantee that they would actually accept that manuscript. So the other day I was talking to my lovely, lovely college friend Daniel. We were at drama school together, and he's another sort of quite artistic soul. And he was telling me about his friend who had been in exactly the same situation, where she'd submitted her manuscript and got quite a bit of interest from agents, and each agent had asked her to do something slightly different, to chop it down, to change something, to reorganize something, and she'd done it for each of these agents, and each one of them had folded before a contract. So she'd spent months changing her work and kind of trying to make it perfect for each agent, and in the end none of them took it. And so she was also feeling extremely frustrated and depressed, and sitting there thinking, but hold on a minute, you know, my book was fine as it was. And just bending over backwards to try and meet these different sort of commercially viable expectations doesn't make you feel good. And this is the problem that I have, is even if I did it, if I did what they were asking and they did accept it, would I resent having done that? I don't know. Would I Because as I said, I've never, much to the chagrin of my family, I've never been particularly money driven. Money has never really been my orientation when it comes to artistic things. And so, yeah, I just feel very uncertain about it. And I was asking a lot of friends, and half my friends were saying, yes, do it. Yeah, cut it down. Go on, give it a go. And other friends were saying, well, no, stick to your gut feeling. What do you feel about it? And I feel like I wouldn't enjoy the process. I feel like even if it was accepted, I don't think I'd feel any happier about the book. So I think what I've come to the conclusion is I'm going to self-publish this one. I'm going to get it out the door. I'm going to get on with the second one. I'm going to get that out the door. And I'm just going to then continue, because I feel like if I don't do something with it now, I'm never going to write anything again. And yeah, it's a good story. I don't think it's my best story, but I could write something better, but I need to be writing in order to do that. And at the moment I'm not, and I haven't been for 2 years. And yeah, so I'm waffling a bit here. What would you do if you got that response to your book from an agency? What would you do? And if you have been in this position before, what did you do? And was it worth it? Let me know below, because I really like to hear, especially from any other authors who have been through the same situation. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to stop waffling about it at the moment. It's been a very, very difficult decision to make, because you know, it's really not every day that you get something so nice back from such a prominent agency. And the slight problem I feel is if I do it and I go down that route, then I'm going to have to keep doing it forever and every other book I ever sell to them. It's like, you know, you can't just chop it down for this one book and go, here you go. You're going to have to write books like that forever. And problem with me is I'm not a particular one-stop genre. I write different books. Every book is different. Every book is a different length. It's about something different. It's usually dark. It's usually pretty dark, but it can be fantasy. It can be historical fiction. It can be a mixture. It can be romance. I've done a romance book. That was a weird and fantastically strange but quite satisfying experience. But you know, and I've ghostwritten books as well, and every time I write it's different, and I don't like the idea of starting out at the very concept stage of a book going, is this commercially viable? I'm just not that kind of writer. So there we go. And I'm going to spend the rest of Indie April getting this book ready for self-publication. Hopefully when I've finished and it's out there, you can have a read through and let me know whether or not it was worth it. Alright guys, so that's my Indie April introduction post over. I probably won't be posting much more about writing this month because it does tend to sink my analytics. It's not commercially viable. But yes, that's a little bit of an insight into the tortured mind of an artist. Yeah, alright, bye.